everybody, and welcome to, wow, the fourth session of Learning Jam already. It's lovely to see everybody here. So my name's Kirsten, and I'm an educator who works with schools across the world. So I've been with IB PYP for nearly 20 years now, and I've been in international education for over 25 years. It's lovely to see so many people joining us. We're here with Lawrence Myers, tell you a little bit more about him later, but meanwhile, just say hello from where you are. Let us know who's joining with us today. So just tap up in the chat and we'll get started. We have a few people on the call with us. We are trialing something new with Learning Jam, which is having active participation for some of the sessions so that you can actually see what's happening live on screen, just as it would be done with students. So very briefly, before we introduce Lawrence, just say hello to Deb. Just tell us where you're coming in from.
Hi, I'm in India.
Okay, and we have on also with us Mihai. Say hi, Mihai.
Hi, I'm Mihai from Qatar.
Okay, so and hopefully we might get one more person joining us from Malaysia. If not, I'm here and I will also join in. So let's see who is joining us on the chat. So we have Nina in Malaysia, we have in Egypt, we have Napaporn in, oh, it's M, hi M, I used to work with her, KIS, in Thailand. We've got Jenny all the way over in Australia, and Clarice is already saying she loves the title of Systemic Thinking. So that is what we're here to do today. We're here with lovely Lawrence in Dubai, and he's going to take us through systems thinking in the campus. And I'll just take you through a few housekeeping pointers before we start. Lawrence, can I have the next slide, please?
I can work out how this thing, there we go.
There we go. Okay, so Learning Jam is hosted by Toddle, and Toddle is for IB schools, the one-stop shop for all the teaching and learning needs, currently in PYP and MYP, where you can plan collaboratively, create authentic assessments, document your learning journeys, streamline your IB evaluation, and engage families, all from one intuitive interface, getting lots of great feedback as well on how the platform is supporting online learning. Okay, next slide, please. The entire Toddle team is educators and are committed to providing educators with a range of learning opportunities to support their development. So this way they have several different initiatives to support educators like you, be it through the Inquiry Educators Summit, which is the largest inquiry focused conference in the world, or through Toddle Learn, where on Toddle Learn, there's an exclusive library of blogs, free resources and talks, which are actually available to anybody. You don't have to be at an IB school, and there really some great sessions and some great resources available freely. And then Toddle Community is for IB educators at practicing IB schools. Lots of resources, lesson plans, unit plans being shared on the community. Which brings me to Learning Jam. This is a community event. We really wanted to support the idea of lifelong learning, and 2020 we knew was hard for educators, all about adapting to the change that COVID brought with us. And we see 2021 as the chance to take learning to the next level, with a focus on engagement and fun, virtual or physically. And we're really excited to have Lawrence here today, who can help us take this forward. So just a few housekeeping points. Lawrence cannot hear you, so please type any questions in the question tab and I will pass them on. Please use the chat feature. Make sure that it is on all panelists and attendees on your drop-down menu so that everyone can see your comments and we can have interactions in the chat. We will not be using the raise your hand feature. In this webinar has been developed independently from and is not endorsed by the IB. And we thank all our speakers for generously sharing pro bono at the Learning Jam. And we see we have Liam has just joined us as an active participant. So Liam, do you want to say hello from everyone and say where you're zooming in from today?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I'm a little bit late, everyone. I'm beaming in from Malaysia. My name's Liam Hammer. I've currently been working for about 25 years in different international schools. So great to be here. Thank you, Kirsten.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us. And just a reminder to the active participants that when we hand over to Lawrence, we'll just stop our videos until he invites us back to participate. And with that, we have 114 people on the call so far. and just a few people joining now from Cambodia, from China, from India, even from Seattle in the USA, from Peru. So really is very global, and somebody in Qatar with you too, Mihai. So over to Lawrence to let's get the party started.
So thank you very, very much, Kirsten. I really appreciate, first of all, having this opportunity, but second of all, being able to interact with you and with members of the group here. I did want to take a couple seconds. I don't really typically like talking about myself, but I think putting things into context is important. So I wanted to ask Kirsten too later on, maybe if there are any people from the western end of Europe, because for them it's what 5:30 in the morning probably. So that's the real test. If there are people from there, then we know we've got some diehards in the group. Let me talk just a little bit about myself. I'm currently the service learning coordinator at the American School of Dubai. And we are not a PYP school or MYP school. We have the American system and AP, but we do have a kind of deeply embedded culture of curricular service learning and an ever-growing presence, so to speak, of sustainability on our campus and in everything that we do. So part of what I'm going to discuss today is kind of the contextual case study piece, let's say, of the tool that we're going to kind of do a deep dive in. And part of it has to do with the tool itself, which is one of the main tools and has the same name as the organization of Compass Education, which is a not-for-profit organization based in Chiang Mai, but really with a lot of volunteer educators around the world. And as of course we move from one place to another, so I used to be in Malaysia for many years when I first got into the Compass Education crowd, so to speak. And now, of course, having moved to Dubai, I have a chance to engage here locally as well. So Compass Education is kind of a worldwide group, quite small, very eager, and really kind of looking forward. So I think between the American School of Dubai and its very kind of lofty mission of wanting to get contributors in a rapidly changing world, and Compass Education, whose goal is really to engage and empower educators to make positive change in the world, for me, that's kind of where I fit, I guess, my personal story. So it's beautiful to wake up in the morning and know that I'm going to try to support others in really making positive change. And the fact that I'm an educator really fills me with purpose and with hope. And so that's why I'm offering this small little delving into this specific tool today. Very briefly, we have what we call changemaker education at our school. And we have experts that focus specifically on service learning, such as myself. And the way that we talk about service learning, it's more of a how than it is a what or a why. So the service learning is really an approach to how we do things and allowing kids to develop their leadership skills and their service mindedness, so to speak. Global citizenship, the way we look at it, are the dispositions and the skills that really are necessary to allow service learning to flourish. And sustainability certainly is a what. But for me personally, it's also the why. A sustainable world should be a positive, optimistic view of the possibilities that exist for us. And certainly we're starting to get our feet wet in terms of how wonderful sustainability can be and a sustainable world can be. So I wanted just for a second, and Kirsten, I don't know if you're able to chime in vocally or verbally, but I wanted to invite everybody to tell me what is this thing called at your school? So we call it changemaker education, but of course it involves all of these. Perhaps at your school you have a different terminology. I would be very interested to hear what the vocabulary is, I guess, at the school where you are working. So if you don't mind.
Tap up in the chat and then we can see what people are thinking, what they're doing at their schools. Yeah. Just give them a minute. Okay, so we've got CAS, Creativity Action Service, which is the IBDP, and often extends down through the senior school. That's from Adam Hill. Miss E saying Innovation Lab. They call it Innovation Lab when they look at these things. Somebody's referencing the approaches to learning in the IB. And we've got Services Action Learning coming in. Adam's saying he also has a volunteering scheme called Action and Service Volunteers. Action and Equity, that's from Chad in the USA. DFC, Design for Change. I'm going to attempt this name. Sangalakshmi Ramakrishnan. I might need lessons. That's a wonderful name. Beautiful. So DFC, Design for Change, is coming up. So all sorts of things, but we're basically all focusing on the same idea.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kirsten. Thank you to everyone, of course, for sharing that. I think in our conversations that we had internally, we basically tried to figure out, okay, so we've got service learning and we've got a person who's responsible for that. We have sustainability, and we also have something called an edible education program, which is very much food-based. So it focuses on things like food generation, planting, composting, and kind of the circular nature of that. But the idea was, where is the overlap? What exactly do we really want to focus on to find the essence of what we're trying to do? And so that's kind of where change maker education came in. What we really decided was, okay, what we really want is for kids to take action and for kids to actually try to change the world around them now, and not wait for 25 years from now when they're going to be leaders of the world. So kids can make change, and I think there's a general understanding that that is the case. And so that is our focus as well. So we call the interplay of all these three change maker education at our particular institution at the American School of Dubai. Sustainability is also a topic that ranges in what we call it or what we believe it is. I tend to focus on one that has been kind of coined by Alan Atkinson, who is the one who really was the starter of this whole compass conversation. He works in Sweden currently, and I believe he is Swedish originally. So what he calls it is a set of conditions and trends in a given system that can continue indefinitely. And the idea, of course, is that you're basically, there's a certain limit at the bottom of not enough. So let's say not enough food to feed us all. And so, of course, you can't possibly work under that space. But there's also an upper limit of too much. So when we generate too much food and too much food waste, as you might imagine, we have issues in terms of the resources that we use, or how well we can maintain that use and how we can be sustainable about it. So really it's about balance, but you'll notice it's also not a straight line, right? So we're constantly adjusting from too much to not enough, and how do we kind of stay in that space? And that little dotted line really represents a lot of actions and a lot of decisions that are made, hopefully purposefully, to stay within the not enough and too much kind of space. So this is a conversation we might have with our students, but of course with faculty and staff and parents as well in the community in general. Typically, when you hear sustainability development goals come up, or otherwise known as the global goals. I don't know to what extent people have seen these goals before, but I'm hoping that you have. And the goals are kind of given in little packages, so to speak. So poverty is separate from, let's say, reduced inequalities, which is also separate from life on land. And it really looks beautiful. It really looks welcoming. It really looks simple. But the reality of life is that the simplicity of 17 little boxes looks more like this. One thing relates to another, relates to another, relates to another. So if you're a science teacher, you might be doing kind of, what do they call those? Kind of a web activity, like a living web activity, where one animal might eat something else that then gets eaten by something else. It's very similar. Systems in general will have nodes, or the sections of the system, and they'll also have these relationships. Of course, in this case, we've got 17, and they're all roaming all over the place. But this gets complicated. So then the idea is, okay, how do we get a child to recognize that, yeah, it's a system, and it's a dynamic relationship between one and the other, but at the same time not be overwhelmed by this all. So typically what happens to do that is that people focus on kind of larger chunks of the system. The little image on the right side is typically what we might hear. So sustainability is often described, and by UNESCO, for example, United Nations, they have the environment, social or society, and then economic. So they have these kind of three circles. And those are great, and you want sustainability kind of in that middle space, so to speak. You have the one on the left, which is also another one which indicates that, of course, things are overlapping and connected somehow. So the idea visually is that, yeah, you have these different sub areas, but really one links into another and links into another. And then finally, you have kind of the middle one, which talks about almost like the hierarchy of it, right? So at the bottom, we have the biosphere, which is all the natural systems that really need to be taken into consideration so that we can then build our human systems within and above that. So of course, then you have society. And then within the society, you of course have economic elements of that which live kind of at the top. Now you could compress all of those into each other. So you would have the biosphere on the outside, society kind of in the middle circle, and then economy in the middle. What tends to happen though with today's decision making and our push for globalization and capitalism and all the rest is that the decisions that are made are often just economic. And we don't often think about the bigger pictures and the connections that that makes. So what we're trying to do is get children and of course adults to recognize that really there's part of a bigger dynamic. When you go shopping, it's not only about price, or it should not only be about price, it should be about other things as well. So one of the ways that we do that is we talk to our students about 4 basic system conditions, or 4 elements, 4 lenses, if you like. And there are the biological side, which we talked about before, the economic elements, which of course are very important, and then the social elements, which includes things like religion, it includes things like language, like culture, but it also includes interactions on a daily basis, how you treat others, the level of respect or lack thereof, things like that. And finally, the last piece from the compass perspective is the idea of well-being, and how that's separated from the others is that really well-being has to do with the self. So finding my own personal balance, finding my own wellness, or wanting to meditate, for example, those are all indicators of the well-being side of things. So as we move forward, we have this tool. Now I've added little visuals. The tool itself doesn't require the visuals, and in the next slide, I'll talk about that. Visuals really help, especially when you're dealing with younger kids, of course, to try to understand what the categories might be. So you'll notice the compass is right in the middle, and it has kind of color coding, and it has the categorizations of nature, economy, society, and well-being. And of course, those are the same letters that you might find on a compass. So it sounds quite beautiful in how it's connected. But the tool itself is actually quite simple to use, and that is the benefit of it. The simplicity of its use makes it multifaceted. You can go in all sorts of directions, which is quite beautiful. So with children, with little children in particular, especially with the ones that perhaps might not be able to write, you know, your kindergartners or your first graders, having photos or allowing them to draw things is actually quite important. Also, the idea of an economy, you know, what does that look like for younger kids, might be an interesting conversation to have too. But typically the other sides are pretty well established and set up. So I think for right now, what I would like is, if you have any questions, I don't want you to ask them yet, but just kind of keep them percolating for a second. I'm going to ask the other members of the panelists to kind of join us real quick. And what we're going to do is spend maybe 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes kind of walking through the compass together as if we're in a classroom. Now, obviously right now we're online and at a distance. And I think that works for us. Just yesterday, we were informed at our school that we have to go fully online again because of the number of COVID cases in the area and in our school. So what I have found is that the flexibility of our educators is quite impressive, and the students. I have 2 daughters who didn't skip a beat, and they said, okay, I guess it's online, here we go. So the truth is, though, that in reality, you could just as easily have a sheet of paper in a classroom, and you put that sheet of paper down and you have 1, 2, 3, or 4, sometimes 5. I would recommend a group of about 3 or 4. It probably makes for a really nice kind of collaborative space for them to brainstorm and share their ideas. Yeah, if the panelists can kind of share their video screens. Sorry, Mihai, I didn't mean to scare you there by talking too much. I apologize.
No worries.
But basically what I would like to invite everyone to do, and here's where I might need Kirsten to kind of share a little bit. I want some ideas of where to start. So let me explain what makes a good starting place. Often it's a curricular connection that you want to have, or a specific conversation that you want to have. And what you would do is, you don't need the actual compass there in the middle. You would probably just put the word or the concept. but it needs to be a concept that you can relate to natural elements, to economic elements, to social elements, and to well-being. So for example, in our classes, we've done it with a social entrepreneurship class, business really class, it was a unit. And the idea was that the students needed to ideate a service or a good that they wanted to develop, and they wanted to do it through these lenses. So the idea was, if I have a new great idea for the next big thing, that really I shouldn't just be thinking about the money or the utility of it, which is typically what people think, but really also think about, does it provide well-being? Does it treat people justly? And does it have minimal impact or regenerative elements with regard to the natural components of it? So that's kind of a thing, an item. So we've done it with plastic straws. We've done it with our school cafeteria just 2 days ago. We've done it with, like I said, with social entrepreneurship ideas and innovative ideas. So we did it almost as an analytical tool. You also do it with topics and themes. So for example, reforestation or climate change, or issues of obviously of an environmental nature, but you could throw in there congestion or traffic or overpopulation or whatever. The truth is, any one of those works quite nicely. In fact, I'm hoping that over time, if children do this often enough, that they might actually do this in their mind as they're standing at the grocery store, for example, trying to decide if I should buy an apple that's been imported from Washington State. Sorry to the people from Seattle, or if it's some other fruit that perhaps just came locally, for example. So what I'm looking for is, if people might have some ideas, just throw them in on the chat, and we can kind of use your ideas as a starting point. And Kirsten, I guess what would be nice is if I can have you make a quick decision making, so that if there are 2 or 3 people, 4 people that maybe have a similar idea, we can just use that so that we can work with a larger group.
What we're looking for is a theme to use the compass on. So a theme that we can then work through: nature, economy, society, well-being. So please put up your suggestions for what theme that we're going to use live on this call, put them in the chat, and I will select one. So just waiting to see what comes up. So we've got commerce, we've got poverty. Let's see what else comes up.
Chocolate.
Structural racism, that's a big one.
Wow.
That's very topical. Climate change, genetics. Let's see what comes up. Economy, agency, volunteers, mental health, Climate's coming up a lot. Let's see what else comes up. Natural resources, education, and climate again. I'm going to say climate is the most popular one that's coming up, Lawrence. So let's go with that.
All right, that sounds good. So maybe if I can ask for Mihai, could you do me a favor, Mihai, and just right in the middle of the compass, can you just put the word climate in there? For everyone who's watching, we're using the annotation function on the Zoom, and it's relatively new for us. So this is a little bit of a learning for even the people who are presenting. So which I really generally celebrate. I really like to share learning in real time. And so, okay, so the topic is climate. And of course, like I said, we're doing it online, but you could just as easily do this in a classroom if you happen to be face-to-face. You can also do it independently. So you can have students do this. A lot of times we might use it as a formative assessment, for example, to see what kids might know about climate. And so use this tool to kind of just throw your ideas down. So typically when we're talking about actually using this in the classroom, there are certain guidelines because it is a visible thinking tool and it's a collaboration tool. But generally what we do is we ask for kids to recognize that different people have different ideas and there are no bad ideas. So at this point, we're not shooting anything down. Anything is valid and anything is appropriate. And really what's important is that we just put stuff on here. Now, for the ease of this particular experience, we're going to do it kind of section by section a little bit. And we're going to invite everyone on this call, the panelists, but also for anybody who might want to add an idea. We're just going to focus on the nature side. And really what we're talking about in terms of systems thinking are cause effects elements that we make, any connections that we make. So for example, I might say something along the lines of the world is getting hotter, something like that. And so I put the world is getting hotter and I've just made that connection to the nature side in this particular case related to the climate conversation. Again, my voice is valid, so nobody else can argue that, no, I'm not right at this point in time. We're just focusing on kind of a brainstorming session. So I'd like to spend maybe 2-3 minutes, and I invite the panelists to please participate here actively. So any ideas you might have that are related to climate, that are on the nature side, so anything related to natural habitats, to biodiversity, to any of those kind of topics is fair game.
Okay, so just to clarify for everybody, the panelists are going to type in directly onto the screen using the annotation tool, and anybody can put in their thoughts in the chat, and then I'll pick those up and add them in as well. So this is a way of including everyone, even with a massive group. And we're demonstrating as well, like how you can use online tools to support learning, as well as thinking about this system. So in real time though, Lawrence, you might have these laid out on a table or have kids draw their own charts, right? Correct?
That is exactly correct. And yeah, so typically you would have, again, I wouldn't recommend a group more than 4. And honestly, I like irregular numbers. So if there are 4 sections, I like to not have 4 if possible. So maybe 3. So that forces them to not be totally pigeonholed in their little kind of cubby, which is what we're doing right now. So in real time, you wouldn't necessarily do it one at a time. You would just kind of throw stuff on. That could be my personal preference versus how somebody might want to run it. And that's entirely up to you. So what I'm seeing here is climate is always in a state of change. We have melting ice, we have extinction, we have curiosity and anthropomorphic climate change, threat to flora and fauna, erosion. Okay, I'm noticing that we started with kind of bigger topics, and now they're getting a little bit more specific, which is great. Forest fires and droughts. And this tends to happen as people start putting their ideas on the piece of paper. And that's why the visible thinking piece of this is pretty huge, because a child who might not have super, 16 thoughts at the first second might actually recognize by looking at something else that, oh, wait, I'm making a connection now. So it's important that it's actually being done kind of in real time as we speak, so that people can actually follow ideas, although not the conversation just yet. So now we're down to things like bushfires. We're down to weather patterns, which is great. We've got air pollution, all of these things related to climate. Extinction, we already had light pollution. So now we're starting to think a little bit more divergently, if you like. The word causes is there. We can talk about what causes what, and I think that's really when you start getting into the systems dynamics of the conversations that you're having. Okay, just in terms of time and space right now. So we're at a point where it's relatively full. So I'll ask maybe for the panelists to stop for just a moment. In reality, this can keep going, but since we're in a 1-hour workshop setting and everybody's watching the fishbowl here, let me stop that for a second. And let's maybe move to the right side. So we're talking now about economy. And the idea, again, is we're talking about climate as a theme, but now we're making similar connections as we just made to nature, but we're making them to economy. Again, economy doesn't just deal with a macro economy. It might deal with issues of jobs or my personal work experience, things like that, but they're of an economic nature. So same rules apply. Panelists, feel free to jump in and throw any ideas you have. For people who are watching us, please feel free in the chat to kind of share your ideas so that Kirsten can add them as well.
There's so many, I can't go fast enough. They're just like, they're on it.
That's awesome. I'm happy to hear that because it means people are paying attention at least.
Oh my goodness, there's like, it's flying up. Every time I look down, there's another 50 messages.
There you go. Just be selective, Kirsten.
I am like, oh, look at that. The same thing at the same time. I didn't even see that other one coming up.
Okay, so I'm going to move my people over to this side so I can see.
Yeah,
so
we're getting the same things coming through. That's interesting, isn't it?
So you've got carbon footprint, you've got overcrowded cities, you've got export and imports.
A lot coming up about demand and supply in the chat. A lot. Production.
So we've got a lot of economists here. And of course, the economists will argue that needs to find its equilibrium. The problem with me with economics is that it treats all of this as an externality. And I find as I get older that economics is a little bit too confined in its nature, and yet the way it's taught, it's supposed to be really broad. So I find myself really questioning how we teach economics to be fair.
People are reading each other's minds, because I just put up poverty from somebody in the chat just as one of the participants.
Perfect.
all in poverty, so we're all on the same vibe.
So we've got job losses, we've got inflation, we've got profits, effect on countries in the global south. Okay, so again, we're starting with broad things. Migration is in here, and over time, what happens is as people look and start making connections, they get a little bit more detail. So if you're facilitating this in a class, for example, it pays to be patient and let the thinking kind of flow, because that will get you into more detail, and more detail is in the end kind of where you want to be.
I love this. So Ashmi is already making a connection. Crop loss because of climate change. And my language head is going, oh, I could teach the toolization language. I could do due to, causes of,
Perfect.
all these kind of things.
Okay. So again, for the sake of space, maybe we have one more little one we can add somewhere, but let's hold on for just a moment. Again, I'm hoping that people are literally thinking, oh, wait, I want to add something, because that's really a good sign that people are engaged and they're not quite there, right? So if you get to the point where there's absolute boredom, it means the facilitators stopped too late. Okay, so let's stop right there for that, because I think there's plenty of ideas and thoughts. And let's move down to the society level. So society, again, has to do not necessarily with the self, but with the larger connections that we're making with typically other people. So they're kind of human systems. Again, society might include things like maybe even urbanization in some cases. It would include things like culture. It would include things like language. Traditional versus more globalized societies come up a lot. How we interact with other societal groups or within our societal group matters. So any ideas there? Go. Displacement has come up twice. Decision making, social classes. Again, we're starting with very broad topics, right? And I'm guessing that over time, it should kind of start floating into more detailed topics as we go. So there we go. So we started with displacement. Now we're talking about refugees, for example. We started with social classes. Now we're down to social class, tradition, racism, and culture. Cultures has come up a couple times. The word deniers is in there too, which I guess has to do with the climate.
Media is coming up a lot in the chat as well.
Can you repeat that, Kirsten? Sorry.
So media is coming up a lot in the chat, which is interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of power, especially now where we basically self-regulate the media, right? And I think about all the conversations they have about the extremism of political views. And I often think to myself about how my let's say Twitter feed probably looks very different from the next person's Twitter feed. And so we're looking at what we're perceiving to be valid information, but my valid information coming from so many sources is completely different from what the other person's perception of valid information is, right? So that's really important.
That's mindset. That's nice. Mindset.
Yep, mindset, absolutely. And I should add, now that you mentioned mindset, there's another tool that we use in the Compass course that we teach that has to do with an iceberg. And the iceberg is the idea of starting from something that's seen, what we call an event, and moving down to kind of a mental model, which is this mindset piece that you're talking about. So a lot of that's kind of the causality, let's say, of if I see a little kid being bullied, what are the true mindsets at the bottom? I mean, there's a process to go through, but yeah, often it does come down to mindset. And there's the word tolerance here. There's the word racism. There's the word decision making. I mean, a lot of these make good connections. Okay, again, just for the sake of just how full this is, let's take a break for a second. Keep in mind, it looks here like we have 158 participants. Typically, you'd only have 3 or 4. So you'd have a little bit more space perhaps, but this is great. And then let's now swing over to the left side, which is the well-being kind of lens. Again, remember that well-being is separated from society in that it's of a personal nature, typically speaking.
So Lawrence, in terms of like online learning, just while people are tapping in now, in terms of online learning, we could actually just pre-share this with pre-selected groups, have everybody on the call. They don't even need to go into breakout rooms because we've already sent it via email or whatever, and they have their set, and then they can do it together as their little group. On Jamboard or anything like that, and then they can just screen share so others can see it, right? So it's a way of keeping everyone engaged.
In fact, sorry, go ahead.
No, just saying, love it. Carry on.
Okay, in fact, what we would typically do is we at our school would use Google Meet. That's kind of our go-to method, but similar to this. And then with Google Meet, we would do the breakout rooms, and I would have a blank version of this on a Jamboard. But typically, let's say we have 20 kids in a class, so we decide to have 5 groups. So we would literally have 5 blank compasses, one on each page. So group 1 to go page 1, group 2 would go to page 2, group 3 would go to page 3. So each one had their own little one. And so within their small group, they're working on this. But then when we all come back from the breakout rooms, then we can all see each other's as we go through the Jamboard slides. So that actually works quite nicely as well.
I'm just thinking of, like, in primary, we're not allowed to send them to breakout rooms, but you could do this by
Absolutely.
selected group links
Yeah.
and things like that. It's all.
Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, I can be sharing my screen, but if it's a Jamboard, all the kids have access to it, right? So I would just be sharing what the kids are already looking at on their screen. So there are multiple ways to kind of share this information. Sorry, let me go back to the content here for a second. You'll notice that a lot of times really the teaching piece is not the content piece, right? So this is how we're separating the teacher from being the know-it-all to the teacher really being the facilitator of the learning. So of course, as a facilitator, I might have a few thoughts, or there might be elements that I need to teach that I want to make sure are addressed. But there's a lot of good stuff here, right? So you're talking about anxiety, you're talking about self-efficiency, movement, respiratory tract disorders. So that's quite specific now. All right, so habits, talking about discipline in general, mental health and wellness. A lot of people make the connection to COVID, which to be fair hasn't come up here, but a lot of people do make that connection and say, you know, the entire situation that we're in right now, the stress we're all feeling, now is that society or is that well-being? You know, different people will put it in different spaces, but generally speaking, that's kind of one of the issues that does come up. So is COVID climate related? Is it not climate related? How much does it have an effect on what we are experiencing right now? Okay, so let's hold off there because I'm worried about our time. And this is great. So the first step really to this is what we've just done. Just kind of brainstorm ideas. There are no bad answers. Where you put it sometimes will also be a point of contention. So for example, I don't know, light pollution was put under nature. Somebody else might actually put it under well-being, for example, right? Because their personal experience is such that they believe it affects their well-being, which is perfectly fine. Okay, so the first little section is just the brainstorming section and really creating a situation where there's a lot of visible learning going on. You would typically allow students a little bit of time to kind of digest what they see, although that will also naturally happen as the flow of conversation happens in the smaller groups. Again, this is a little bit weird because we're in a bit of a fishbowl situation here, but in general, you would have that opportunity to kind of chat a little bit as Kirsten and I are. The second section of this activity is now making connections. And in those connections is where the systems thinking piece kind of starts blending in, but on a very basic level, which to be fair is a fantastic level for people who aren't used to systems thinking on a detailed base, right? So for your average person. So what I'm going to now invite maybe just the panelists. I know there are going to be like a million things happening here, but I think I would prefer that only the panelists get involved, because in this section, it's a little bit more important that we listen to the connections that people are making. So I'm going to maybe call out, and what I would like for the panelists to have 3 or 4 potential connections that they're already making. So the idea of this next section is you pick 2 things. They don't have to be in the same category. In fact, it might be better if they're not. And essentially create a cause-effect connection between those 2. So for example, I might say, I don't know.
Between inequality and employment, I can see.
Okay,
one.
perfect. Okay, so why don't we start with you, Kirsten, since you want to make that connection. So for everyone who's at home right now, what we're asking for is actually there it is, visibly making an arrow from the cause to the effect. Now, in a face-to-face situation, that might look more like a squiggly line than it does here. But tell us about your connection, Kirsten.
Well, I'm actually, I'm super aware of this because, you know, I'm quite active in supporting people in recruitment in international education. So just only in that element, I'm super aware of the inequality due to perception, due to nationality, due to first language, due to where you did your qualifications. And you know, it's not equal. It's not about like how great a teacher you are. It's a lot of it is about, oh well, the parents want somebody from the UK or USA, so it's inequity, it's inequality in hiring in terms of employment, and that's just in our sector. And I could take that and talk about that all over the world.
Thank you. Anybody else want to share a thought from our panelists? Mihai.
Yes, I'm thinking of a connection between the goal setting and, okay, so I'm just going to,
Oops, where are you? Oh, you're up there. Okay.
all right. Goal setting and production, demand, supply. All right, we are living in an era of consumerism, and we are exposed to so much. Like when we enter a supermarket,
Yeah.
it would be easier just to not to be overwhelmed, just standing in front of a, I don't know, a million or 10 or 20 products of the same sort that we're looking for. So that's the connection I'm making here. It's
Thank
fantastic.
you very much. Liam, was that you who did the other one?
Yeah, so I've already made my red arrow. I see changes in the climate and changes in not necessarily crop losses, but crop changes,
Yeah.
and some areas becoming less fertile than others can influence or lead to changing human migration patterns, and immigration, emigration could be changing because some fertile lands are becoming less fertile.
Thank you. Deb, do you have any thoughts? It's overwhelming in its present state.
All right, so yeah, it's really it's intense, isn't it? There's so much information, and everybody's typing their connections. Yeah, there's that drought and bushfires, the whole ecosystem, how you can connect it all together. So I'll get working on arrows to do with climate change, drought, and what was the other one that was connected to it? Inflation. Yeah, there was quite a few connections that people were making, and I was trying to read them and work my arrow at the same time, but it doesn't work. But yeah, I'll do that now.
That's okay. I think honestly, the idea of the activity as well is that it's going to be a little bit messy. We'll show a little picture of this later on as well. So there's going to be that messiness that everybody says classrooms should be messy. You know, it's good because it shows that there's a lot of interaction and conversation. So I appreciate that. Somebody has a green arrow to the medical facility for all children. Who was that?
I just want to say before I say that is like Joanne Marie is shouting out about how much she's enjoying this.
Great.
We do just have a question from Nathan about how this is happening. So I just want to reiterate, this is the annotation tool on Zoom. You might have to activate that first in your Zoom settings, but once you display a screen in a Zoom meeting, you have that option. And it's super fun the first time. You have to just let the kids play with it and like let them stamp all over the place and try everything. And then you can settle down, and it really does help to build engagement. But as for that was something that I saw in the chat and I connected with, because I was thinking like in countries where they really have population growth, it's very hard to get access, not just to medical facilities, but to education, to even food. And so a lot of children are let's say, underserved in countries that have high populations. And so, you know, like actually population growth in itself is very connected to sustainability or non-sustainability. And also controlling that brings issues. So I think it's a kind of nice thing to debate. Interesting.
Yeah, and you could let this turn into a lot of, I mean, this could be the content of a whole year's course, like right here.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. So I think for the sake of time, Mihai, you look like you're ready to say something. Why don't you say something, and maybe I'll give Liam one more shot, and then maybe we'll kind of wind it down so we can get to the next few slides. But I'm very happy that this has been so interactive.
Yeah, I'm excited about this spider web, the systemic relationship. You can always discover something new, and this is fantastic. It can make you very curious about what other things are happening in your mind and how you can break those habit boundaries.
That's right.
This is fantastic. There is a lot of dynamic tension because you conflict your own thinking about, oh, maybe this is not possible, but actually we are starting to learn, and our students start to learn when they see things that as connected. So this is, I think, the biggest takeaway for me now.
Yeah, I just want to add this looks like the inside of my brain, I think.
There you go. Visible thinking.
Oh yeah, I relate.
Hey, Lawrence, there's a question come up that does the four sections, society, well-being, nature, economy, does that ever change, or is that standard?
Yeah, so with the compass kind of system, let's say, like I said a little bit earlier, different organizations will use kind of different lenses, I guess, and really it's up to you. But Compass uses these specific four. What I really like about them, like I said before, nature, economy, society tend to come up a lot. But this one includes the well-being, which is the personal side. And I think a lot of people, as you know, time ticks on and we all get more and more stressed and recognize, you know, the connections between the inner world, so to speak, and the outer world. I think this really speaks to me, I guess, more than anything. And I think as a school, we've tended to embrace it. And I think a lot of times for people who don't really think about sustainability as a personal issue, this actually makes a really good connection to that, because a lot of times people don't recognize that my own personal well-being is affected in positive or negative ways to the larger picture. And really, that's one of the key takeaways, I think, in terms of what we do in Compass. Sorry. Okay, so let me move on because I'm realizing that we're kind of running out of time, but I'm hoping that everyone here, even the panelists, kind of had a good chance to play around with this and see what the dynamic was. I really like Mihai's statement about the what was it, the tension that it builds, and I think that's really nice. You want to be in that place where the kids are being cognitively challenged, and sometimes disagreements might happen. Of course, you as a facilitator would need to make sure that you've got kind of your guidelines set. Okay, so let me move forward just a little bit. I'm going to try to get into, okay, oops.
Wow, holy heck.
I know, I'm sorry. I need to somehow clear and I can't, oh, here we go.
Wow.
Sorry, I'll work it out, Hold on, there we go.
Wow. Wow.
So this is what the, it might look like in a classroom. And these are just examples. I think both examples are from UWC in Singapore, the East Campus, I believe. And you'll notice that they're quite different. So the one on the left, of course, talks about what happens when you cut down rainforests. And then the one on the right talks about the SDG number 12, which is responsible consumption and production. These are just examples to show people how messy it can be. Obviously, the one on the left really is not super well developed, so I'm assuming that the time factor could have been an issue there as well. The one on the right is obviously given time to kind of develop through the whole thinking. But it does get so messy, as was the case in our little example today, where if you weren't there, you don't really know what that conversation was about in many cases. But the idea is that this is kind of evidence of what this might look like in a real class. And of course, here's an example down below the picture of kids using the overlay of the compass as a screen, like as a projector tool, and the kids working on a whiteboard, which is how that specific class is doing it. Again, you can do it on paper. Now, of course, we can do it online as we're talking about it, or you can do it in that kind of front of the class, everyone's sharing their ideas on the whiteboard thing. All right, let me keep going here. And we're almost done. The key elements for me, as far as dealing with the kids, I keep trying to make it as simple as possible. You know, okay, systems thinking can be really complicated, even for very well-developed minds, far more developed than my own. But what are the basic elements of what we're really trying to get kids to do? So you'll notice that we already did the first two, the top two of this list, right? So that they're looking at something from different perspectives. If I'm sitting there about to buy a t-shirt and all that I ever think of is what does it cost and how comfortable is it? I'm not really thinking about the other dynamics. So maybe I need to think a little bit more about the societal story behind the t-shirt or the nature story behind the t-shirt and start making those connections. So my t-shirt has a story. You know, what is that story? And in fact, if you want to ask what the story is and you can't find it, that usually for me is a little bit of a red flag. So if you ask the store, you know, where does this come from? And they can't tell you, usually that's a little bit, I don't know, do I really want to buy this or not? The third piece here that we're talking about is the systems thinking piece. So that kind of dynamic movement. Now, in our particular case, we were just talking about the issue. We weren't making a specific decision, but you could extend the conversation to try to figure out, okay, what are those points that keep coming up over and over, where maybe addressing that point might have multiple benefits to it. So we didn't flip the conversation from the analytical to the, excuse me, from the analytical to the solutionary, let's say, but certainly that could be a flip that you can make in the class. One other thing that we want to focus on is this idea of unintended consequences. The truth is we live in a globalized world. We are all connected. Anything we do will probably have a negative implication somewhere along the line. So it's an idea of, again, trying to uncover what that story is and minimize the known unintended consequences, recognizing that sometimes what seems like a great solution actually causes an onward domino effect that's actually quite negative potentially. So we need to just be aware of that. And the last point is that kind of disposition of recognizing that, okay, it's all a balance. Let my decisions be as positive as I can make them and create as little harm as possible. And I think the most good least harm is actually a book as well, written by Zoe Whale, I think, in the Institute of Humane Education. And it's a great book to start from if you're looking for reading as well. So let me move on. Just a quick, again, kind of invitation for people to share maybe how what they just went through might be usable in their context. Like what kind of a setting would you potentially use it for? And if Kirsten, if you can share a couple of these, that'd be great.
Yeah, Lawrence. So I just wanted to say that the compass is really marvelous for sustainability, but I've used it across the curriculum, and we used it in a civilizations unit. It was really fantastic. We used it in a media unit, in a production unit, and it really like provokes connective thinking. Jennifer is saying that what she loves most about it is it can be universally applied to keep the global goals in mind. And how she sees it is if administrators put the school into policy for brainstorming across the school, and that happened everywhere, then that would really make positive change, connections to real life. So I thought that was a lovely suggestion. Renya's saying she thinks this would be a fantastic experience in professional development with teachers. Mihai's saying, I see the learning approach is, it's gone down, sorry, here we go. Dissimilar context for physical education. To start the year, Clarice is saying it would really help with a kind of organizational unit for starting the year, getting kids involved in things. So lots of connections being made there. Thanks so much. People are very excited about trying this out. I see people saying, I'm going to use this next week.
That's awesome. So excited. Anyway, so let me then, thank you, Kirsten, for that. Let me just kind of finish up with typically there's a small tribe doing this stuff. And so often really it's all about the connections that you might be able to make and where can you find more information. I'm just one. I have thankfully a supporter in Sandy Carden, who's our edible education coordinator and garden coordinator, who does a lot of work, like I said, with food and things like that. Of course, the Compass group is a much larger group than just myself. But a lot of times, really, it's about making those networking connections and talking to people who've tried things out. Everything is new. The entire online world is new. And the way that we as teachers are thinking is starting to shift in a way that really fills me with a lot of optimism and positivity. So I'm offering a few of these. You can, I don't know, screenshot it or whatever works for you. Also, just a little sales pitch on my part. I'm one of the 2 or 3 facilitators for what we're calling the Compass Education Online kind of level 1, which is the intro, which includes this work. We find that people who engage in the course itself create a really nice professional learning community. And of course, there are a number of other tools that we go over as well. And the next course starts on February 1st. So if anyone's interested in that, let me know as well. And then the bottom two of these are more just overall resources. The third one is literally just a website of resources that I put together because about 10 years ago when I started this work, there was very little there. The world has completely changed in these 10 years, which is fantastic. But if you just want a go-to list of things, I decided at the time that if it was going to be available to me, I might as well make it available to the world. And finally, the last piece is more about kind of that professional learning network on Facebook in particular. I think, Kirsten, you're a member of that as well. So the idea is, in what ways can we converse about these issues of sustainability or service learning or global citizenship? But as Kirsten very well pointed out, you start thinking, okay, I'm going to do this for sustainability, and then you realize that actually this systems thinking thing, the conversations it generates, the depths of conversation and learning are applicable across the board. So it's not service learning, it's not sustainability or global citizenship. It's just really good learning all across. So I think at this point, I'd like to open it up if anyone has any questions. I know we only have maybe 5 minutes, Kirsten, I'm sorry. But
well, I think mostly I'm just getting enthusiasm, people just saying thank you for sharing, and lots of that sort of thing. Somebody's saying they put them on they put on their Jamboard for tomorrow already. Wow. So really making an impact. And I just would like to jump in and say that somebody who has done the level 1 course and is desperate to do the level 2 course, I took some of my teachers from KAS onto it, and it significantly changed their thinking about what we could do for our exhibition, for example. Anybody here does that, PYP exhibition, but lots and lots of things. And one of our teachers went on to become a Compass trainer after doing that. She did the first session, then the second session, went on to be a trainer. So it really does grab you because you can see so many applications. They teach you so many great tools, routines, ways of doing things that, like, after 25 years in education, it was like actually one of the few sessions where I actually thought I learned a lot during those 2 days. So highly recommended, not just because I like Lawrence.
Thank you, Kirsten. That's a better ad that I could possibly come up with for myself. And the other thing,
I got one question. One question.
Go ahead.
How could you connect the compass with the unit personal experience under the transdisciplinary thin who we are? So how could you bring it sort of into personal experiences? How might you connect the compass for younger children?
Okay.
Under sort of personal experiences.
So I think for me, the lowest hanging fruit is typically talking about personal decisions. And I guess a lot of times we've used it, for example, in a 4th grade. This might be too old even, I'm not sure what grade level you're working with. But the idea, like I said before, when you're sitting there in front of the t-shirt and you're ready to make that purchase, that kind of a very personal and practical experience really kind of resonates with kids a lot of times because it is a personal choice. So for example, you could use the cafeteria. You walk into the cafeteria, you're about to buy something. How is what you're about to buy affecting the world? So you put that specific food item into the middle and then you compass it. Now, of course, in a kid's mind, they're only thinking about that for 3 seconds while they decide whether they want pizza or whether they want fried rice or something like that. But the idea being that really everything does have multiple connections to other things. And as consumers, a lot of times, we don't take the time to do that. So I think a child is a consumer already. They're already making choices. And so getting that child to think about those daily choices that they make in this kind of a way, not that it'll change their thinking immediately, but I think over time, it does make people a little bit more mindful about the choices that they make in terms of diet, in terms of what they wear, in terms of where they travel and how they travel, all those kind of things. And those are quite personal, I think, regardless of what age.
Okay, well, we have literally a minute and a half left. So any final thought from you, Lawrence, before I wrap up?
Yeah, I guess more than anything, thank you. Thank you to you, Kirsten, and to Toddle, of course, for inviting me. This has been so exciting. And thanks, of course, to Liam and Mihai and Deb and the whole team. We've never tried it like this in a fishbowl kind of experience before. So that was new and exciting for me. And I think hopefully. It worked pretty well. And I'm very excited with just the positivity of the group and of course, everyone who's here. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm available on whatever, Twitters and LinkedIn's and all that kind of stuff if anybody wants to keep the conversations going. And if you are going to use these things, by the way, I'm sure Compass would like this. Compass has a hashtag called Compass Education. So if you use the tool on Jamboard, let's say next week, please upload it on Twitter and put the hashtag in there. And like, we're always trying to share how people are using it and create that conversation globally.
Thank you so much. And so please also hashtag Learning Jam if you're sharing any of your learnings so that we can see the effect of the conference. Thanks again to Lawrence for giving up his time. And I really encourage you to keep joining. We've got some amazing sessions coming up. Next one is with Ben Newsome, who's an amazing science educator. I mean, this guy's energy is unbelievable. When I first Zoomed with him to chat about it, he was talking to me about how he was going to set up the session, but he had his camera turned off because he was setting up football goalposts for his coaching session. He's dynamic. Anybody here from who does science or is elementary, I really encourage you to join that call. But thank you so much. And we look forward to hearing more from you. Is there any last slide there, Lawrence?
No, that's it.
That's us. Okay, so thank you, everybody. Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Mihai. Thank you. And I'd love to hear feedback from people about how you're enjoying the experience. Also, if you think the active participants with people on the call is a good thing, a bad thing. If you like the new PD, the personal development sessions, got another one coming up with Bron later on about teacher wellness. So look forward to hearing from you all on social media. Bye.
Bye-bye.